Welcome. Welcome back to another episode of Connected. Have you guys missed me? I took a little bit of a break. I know, but you got to do what you got to do. Plain and simple. You guys know how much of an advocate I am for needing the time and the rest and whatever healing that needs to occur, right? Like sometimes I just don't want to talk. I know that might shock a whole bunch of you, but it's true. I get tired and I lack, it's like, I don't know about anybody else, but typically most creative professionals, we have swings. We have moments where we feel super inspired and we're just like creatively like jazzed and lit up. And then there's other times in which our energy is just low and depleted and we can't create for the life of us. So thank you for being patient. Welcome if you're here for the first time and you haven't been waiting like 3 or 4 weeks for a new episode. And to those of you that have, well, you know what? That's life. I don't know what to tell you. No, but so welcome back. Today, I am going to attempt to talk about conflict resolution a little bit more extensively. I know in the previous episode, I talked about it in relation to a question that I was asked as to what my greatest my greatest tip or my greatest whenever I say tip, I'm a child. I'm sorry. I basically just offered my advice, whatever my greatest words of advice were on my greatest process around conflict resolution. But today I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper. You know, what's so funny is I've got sex on the brain, you guys, because I'm planning the next episodes and yes, teaser, I will be diving into sex for basically the rest of the season. So that's very much on my brain right now. And like I said, I'm an Aries, like it's always on my brain. So yes, so today we're going to be going back. We're going to be diving into conflict resolution deeper today. It's so funny because when I started to take the approach that conflict resolution is really just contrast, right? It's no different than any other contrast that we're presented with in our life. And we need contrast. In order to really color our experience. We need it to determine what we like and what we don't like. We need it to see how our emotions are responding to things and maybe where we need to heal and where we need to grow. Contrast is vital to our existence and to our growth here as we are expanding our consciousness. So with that, I think what's really interesting is when I started kind of looking at conflict resolution when I started looking at conflicts that occurred within my relationships, the same as I look at contrast within my human experience, it all just kind of was like, oh, snap. Okay. So, it just brought me back to the application of who am I, like, how is my internal state of being right now? Where am I not maybe showing up for myself? Where am I not honoring myself? Where am I not articulating a need or a boundary? Where am I not showing up for myself? Am I feeling taken advantage of? Am I feeling overworked? Any type of situation, because, those are all things, again, that when you acknowledge them within yourself, it's almost like you're communicating it. You're communicating it to yourself. You're saying, okay, you know what, this is how I'm feeling. So therefore, like, my experience isn't exactly going to be the greatest. So, when conflict arises or when contrast arises, you're not really surprised because you're like, oh, yeah, you're here. It's like, it's like the you again. Only the you again is not your spouse, your partner, the person that you're in relationship with. It's you. It's you. It's, the universe, this reality is always reflecting back to you your internal state of being. Now, it might be slightly delayed, but it's the truth, because how that, it's so funny because I feel like a lot of people come back to me and they're like, well, I don't understand what you mean by that. In terms of like, why would it be delayed? And it really just depends on your perspective. And your perspective kind of shapes everything. So when I say that your reality is a direct reflection of your internal state, that means that crap, literally, you guys, we all have a choice. Like crap literally could be unfolding before you, and you can choose what stories, what meaning, what value is associated to that crap that is happening in your external reality. You don't have to respond or react to everything. You can just say, you can just not react. And honestly, all of our manifestation really is rooted in the emotion. So the more you can kind of become detached to what's happening in your external reality, meaning that you don't attribute so much meaning and value to it, the more, or the easier it is for you to manifest, just in general, because you're not creating your own resistance with your own oh, I want this so bad, like that type of feeling, because that does create resistance, because it shows that it's really important to you, and you're focusing on the lack. You're automatically just going to lack when you want something so badly, because you're realizing that you don't have it, right? You can't want something so badly unless you believe that it is the key to your happiness. But nothing is the key to your happiness, as we've discussed many, many times here on this podcast. So anyway, when you start to kind of just see that your relationship, okay, and this is not just, this is not just allocated towards your romantic relationships. This is all of your relationships. When you start to see your relationships as just another extension of you, another extension of how you're feeling, of what your state of being is, of how detached you are from your current reality, how entranced you are in joy and life and abundance and beauty, then you can really kind of work with that. You can perceive, you can really work with it to you can use it to your advantage. That's what I'm trying to say. You can use it to your advantage to show you what needs to be done. And I discussed this in the previous episode. The way that I kind of go about this is by trying to, the minute that I see conflicts kind of arise, or the minute that I see contrast arise, and if you start to practice this in your life, without the relationship bubble, right? Without the relationship portion, you will naturally start to apply it to your relationships as well. The minute that somebody asks you to do something, if you're like, no, I don't want to do this, and you start to contemplate doing it, it's kind of you just having if somebody asks you to do something and you're like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, then that's you basically showing you that you don't feel comfortable or strong enough to articulate a boundary. That's you. Or if they think that you, or if you did sign up for something, that then somebody later comes back and says, hey, so are you going to do this? And you say, or if you have all that gristling in your body where like, I don't want to do this. Why did I agree to do this? You agreed to do it at a time in which clearly you weren't either clear with yourself on what your boundaries were and what your needs were at that point. And so you said yes. But the great thing about life is we can always change direction. We can always change our course. We can always choose to stand up for ourselves. We can always choose to show up for ourselves. We can always choose to love ourselves. So it's never too late. So, but that's my point is, so when you find that happening within your relationships, when you find that there is conflict or contrast arising, you can use that to teach yourself, okay, you know what, this is what I did last time, and that didn't work for me because I ended up regretting it. Or, okay, you know what? Maybe when I come home from work, I shouldn't try to physically um, or emotionally engage right away. Maybe I need more space. Maybe I need like more of a transitional time between, one thing to the other. Um, or maybe I need to ask for help, or maybe I need to ask for space. Like these are all things that we can all do. So, but rather than kind of like get really knee deep into that perspective and that approach, because again, I did discuss it in the previous episode, and I've also really talked about it a lot in this season as well as the season before, because I believe that really understanding how we go about manifesting our reality is really important, because that's what we are here to do, is to create a physical reality. I want to talk about, where is it that we find that we so often kind of get stuck. And to me, that is really identifying what our unique process is. What do I need to do in order for me to resolve conflict? Or what does my partner need to do in order for me to feel like the conflict is resolved? Or how can I shift myself emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, so that conflict maybe doesn't trigger as strongly, or I can take space away from the, like I can extract more from the conflict itself, so as to prevent the conflict from even occurring, or from the contrast even showing up. And so for me, like one of the things that I always suggest when working with a client, it doesn't matter if it's a client that is a couple, or a client just like an individual client. I always ask, do you have a process by which, do you have a process for tending to yourself when you are triggered? And the majority of people do not have this. The majority of people, the most, I mean, I know myself, like the majority of the time when I got triggered in the past, I got triggered and I reacted. And then who knew, that reaction could be various different ways. It could be, I can be quite snarky, a little bit of a word ninja. um, I can be frustrated and angry. I can be extremely sad. I can be, I can just want to like leave the room and bury my face somewhere. I can want to distract myself. There's various ways that we all react to conflict or contrast, right? And so the first thing that I would suggest is becoming extremely aware around what your existing process is, right? That's the first thing that we have to do. We have to bring some level of awareness to how we're already coping with the triggers that are already occurring within our life, the contrast, the conflicts that are already showing up in our life. And we have to, say to ourselves, number one, I have an entirely different episode dedicated to emotional processing. It's last season. But I think it's, one of the ways in which I think it's best to kind of deal with conflict is to become as present as possible. And then if both partners are not finding that okay, so I'm going to just suggest this because I feel like most people can't like become so present that they can just like let the conflict disintegrate in front of their eyes. So to me, I think it's best to like identify the triggers or know what the triggers are and just love yourself in that. Okay. No judgment around the triggers. We're not going to judge our triggers. Okay. Because really what comes up with those triggers, the emotional response that comes up in those triggers needs to be felt. So my preferred way around approaching conflict or dealing with conflict when it arises is for me to seclude myself. I need space. I need time. I need myself, basically. Um, I think a lot of people, I think contrast is a beautiful opportunity for us to take a moment and to really be with ourselves. Because until we can fully be with ourselves in that space, we can't invite another person in, because that's like the blind leading the blind. You're essentially, if you're expecting someone to show up for you before you know how to show up for you, you are setting that person up for failure. That person, unless they in some ways, maybe they may be a natural healer, or they may be somebody who is just insanely intuitive, or they may be insanely empathic, or they may abandon themselves in their own moments of triggering. But most people really shouldn't be tending to another person within a conflict. They should be tending to themselves, because they got to get clear on why the conflict, why the trigger occurred to begin with. And the only way that you can do that is by spending time inside. And so for me, my way of kind of coping with conflict or resolving conflict is to pause and say, I just need some time, because I need to get clear. And I always, whoever my partner is, I don't really, honestly, actually, I thought that I thought that I suggested to them, but I'm like, no, I don't think I do, actually. I'm just like, I got to get out of here. But it's not like said that way. It's more or less like, I need some space. I need some time to reflect, because if I don't take it, like, this isn't going to get better. It's going to get worse. So I take my time. I go inside. I cope with my emotions. I nurture myself. I cry my shit out. I do what I have to do. Then I come back and I share. And so often I feel that if couples do this, or if people do this in your life, where, even if this is like a partner or a relationship with your mom, or, another family member or a friend, I feel that a lot of people might do that. But then when they go to share, things get a little rocky because either they're still carrying things over from the conflict and they're not listening to what the person is saying to them that has things to share from coming out of that, that space that they were with themselves, or the person that is sharing isn't sharing in a conscious manner. So, to me, the ideal situation would be after you're both done taking some time to evaluate what the trigger was. Was that an appropriate response? Was the trigger, which it so often is, right, rooted in some story, some traumatic event that honestly doesn't need to be played out anymore, which is why I always believe that it's so important to pause. Don't need to further our trauma. Don't need to, that's what happens when we really participate. When we, just keep going within the trigger, that's what's essentially happening. We're looking to create more trauma to revalidate the story that we've been telling ourselves this entire time. We don't want to do that. So we want to pause, and we want to say to our partner, you can even say something like, I love you, but right now I need some time to myself to get clear. And I'm doing this because I want to take care of myself, and I want to be able to also take care of our relationship. And the best way for me to do that is for me to spend some time alone. Right. So when we come back, after we spend that time alone, when we come back to our partner, I think like the sharing aspect is what's so important that we miss out on. That's the opportunity that can really go amiss or astray if we're not careful. And this is where I would say, people talk about, when you ask everybody, what's the key to a lasting, loving relationship? They always tell you communication. But notice that nobody really ever knows how to properly communicate, or they think that they do. And even myself, someone who, I've always thought I've always been an open communicator. I've always thought that I was a good communicator, but it wasn't until I really started taking the other person, the person who I was sharing with, it wasn't until I started kind of taking, like, thinking about their perspective on things, which is, again, I found very interesting because usually it's very easy for me to put myself in other people's shoes, but it's been interesting to me to see that there's been a lot of sharing that I have done where I haven't really given the person the opportunity to decide whether or not they were even willing or wanting or had the space to receive what it was that I was wanting to share. So this is to me where like conscious communication comes in. And it's so funny because I think, again, some of us may be skilled in sharing and some of us may be skilled in listening, but so few of us are skilled in both. So I've made a list here of things that I believe are really important when you do decide to come together with your partner after there's been contrast, after there's been conflict, to share what it is that you've discovered in your time alone, right? For one, I think the most important thing is to have the agreement that no conversation is going to take place unless both parties are able. And this is where it gets really serious because I think a lot of people are not really clued into their bodies and are really not clued in to where they're maybe feeling that they are not able to receive a person sharing, or where they're not wanting to listen at that time, where they're tired, where maybe they're not feeling feeling like they're energetic enough to receive the energy and the communication from another person, or where, they just may not be like emotionally in the greatest state. And I think so that requires a certain level of self-awareness too, and honesty around where we actually are. Because to me, nobody should be having these conversations unless you absolutely know for sure that you are in the space where you can actually give it your undivided, wholesome attention. And when I say wholesome, I'm not talking about Little House on the Prairie ideals. I'm talking about wholesome, as in, do you feel like you are completely present and whole in your being? If you feel that way, then you can have this interaction, then you can take that time to share with your partner and listen. But if not, then I would suggest waiting until you can return to that state. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for me to wait. I need to share this now, or my partner is putting pressure on me to listen right now. And this is, part of I'm just going to say, this is a byproduct of, unfortunately, the reality that we've created for ourselves. This is not, we really need to stop blaming we need to stop blaming the government. We need to stop blaming the hustle culture. We need to stop blaming everything basically external to us. You are the one that is making these choices to participate in these paradigms. You cannot blame society simply because you don't feel present and whole within your body. You can't blame society anymore. You can't blame the government anymore. You can't blame anybody else. You're making choices. And so, this does require a certain level of shifting when it comes to understanding, okay, what is it that I truly do want to create in my life? This might be the societal expectations of me, but is this what I want? And in making choices based on that. And the more that you make choices, the more you can trust yourself, the more you will show up in wholeness and wholesomeness, as I call it. The more you will be more present in your choices and in your participation within your relationship. So let's get to this list of communication skills. Okay, so as a skilled listener, make sure you can hold space. And it is, again, basically just reiterating what I just said. Make sure that you are willing to be present with that person. And guys, men in particular, I know that you can get impatient, and I know that you can feel like she's saying repeated things. And I know that you may feel like it's dragging on and on and on. But the more that you bring attention to that, the more that your feminine, whoever your feminine is, masculine and feminine, right? So whoever is listening, if you're pointing out that your partner is taking a long time saying what they need to say or repeating, okay, so nobody's going to repeat something unless they feel like that they're not being heard. And if you're focused on time, then you're not able to have that conversation right then and there. If you're focused on time, then you are not present. If you're focused on getting the resolve so that you can move on and she can be happy, you're not present. You're focused on the outcome, not on the exchange that you're having. And guess what? The exchange, the very exchange that you are participating in, is the very thing that is going to determine the success of your relationship. It is the relationship. So many people think that, like, okay, I just got to have this conversation so that I can get past it. And then things can be awesome and amazing. And we can, settle back into our relationship. But what you're not understanding is the rapport, the relation that you have when you are in contrast or when you are in conflict is the very essence. That is what determines the success of your relationship. It actually is the essence of your relationship. So please, as a listener, always make sure that you have the space to listen. That is an act of love for yourself, and it's an act of love for the other person. Okay. And it is absolutely okay in the process of communicating if she says something or excuse me, does something that you find hurtful or that might lack a certain type of proper communication etiquette, right? Within the agreement that you and that person has, you can always call a timeout. Like, that's the thing. As a listener, if you feel like you're losing track of what the other person is saying, or there's been some type of disruption in terms of the integrity of the conversation, call a timeout. Call a timeout. As a skilled listener, you should try to come from a place where you're not making any associations, no assumptions or ideas about the person or the situation. Now, I know that this one is really, really difficult, but we really want to look at the person that we are trying to communicate with as a blank slate. We don't want to go in with a certain amount, like a certain idea or a certain assumption about them, because that, again, influences what we're hearing and how we're perceiving them. Okay, so say that there was like a minor argument that happened around making dinner, or I don't know, loading the dishwasher. If you both take time away to reflect, but then when you come back together, you're still carrying over certain assumptions that were made in that moment, where the conflict occurred, then you really haven't taken enough time to recenter yourself and to create a space where you can be present and just kind of detach, in a sense, because your assumptions are not always accurate. And the whole point of communicating is to see what actually occurred. Okay. So we want to really try to get rid of all of our associations, ideas about the person and the situation. Okay, so the third thing that I feel that we should do as a skilled listener is to withhold all judgment, which is also known as empathetic listening. you know, I feel that whenever we're lacking compassion, it's really just because we think that we would have done things differently given the person's experience, right? But I think that there needs to be an extending of real compassion towards people. This understanding that, you know what, like I'm not that person. And given that person's divine makeup, given their, um, joking, but not really, their astrological birth chart, given their conditioning, given how they were birthed into this world, given who their parents are, given what Brian said to them when they were 8 years old on the playground, given all of their life experiences, I would be the same person. If we can automatically make that deduction that I would be the same person, given all of those factors, that is true compassion. And so if we can listen from that place and withhold all judgment and just see that person, just see them and really accept them, see themselves as us, like see themselves as we see ourselves, right? I think like that would go a long way when it comes to having a communication or a conversation with others, especially after a conflict. Okay, this one's big. Listening for what's new or unfamiliar. I cannot tell you how huge this is. Because again, if we're taking this approach of, okay, you know what? I'm going to relinquish all associations, all assumptions. I'm going to withhold my judgment and I'm going to listen for what's new. You are completely opening yourself, you're opening yourself up to really seeing this person, really hearing this person. And that is going to give you so much new information and really deepen your relationship. So I love that one. I love that one. Yeah, projecting. So be aware not to take things personally, and to really work to understand and listen for the deeper truth, which again, I feel like that's where the listening for what's new is so important, because I think that there is always a deeper truth whenever we're finding ourselves in conflict. It's usually not even that thing that was bothering us. There's some type of trigger that is usually rooted in trauma. And so if we can really withhold our projections, if we can, not take things personally, if we can really hear the other person and listen for what's new, which most likely will evolve into some truth, some, deeply rooted traumatic response that is happening, we again just build more intimacy within the relationship. So I love this one, and this one I battle with all the time. Stop problem solving. No fix it reflex. We all have this issue. I know I have struggled immensely with this issue because I just, the masculine in me just wants to fix it. Just fix it. We think, I think that this also, there's a level of humility that is required with this one, because I think that we so often, I think like, honestly, when we're trying to fix people, we're actually just trying to relate to them. And so we need to be really conscious of, why is it that we're trying to relate to them? Why do we feel that the only way that we can offer anything to this person is by fixing their problems? Or why do we even feel that we need to relate to them at all? We don't need to relate to them. We need to listen to them. And those are two very different things. Fixing is not listening. Listening is completely allowing the person to have their space to vocalize what it is that they need to share, and trusting that they got it, trusting that they can handle it, trusting that they will come to a resolution of their own and attempt, and problem, like, and solve the problem themselves. Okay, so Another thing that really I think is important as you are trying to become a skilled listener is, how do you offer advice or reflections? Are you just, when you're listening to the person, they say, well, I've got this problem, da 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 da. Not only are you stepping in and fixing, but like, how are you offering? If they like, are you just openly offering the advice, or are you asking them, do you want my advice? So this is something that I have learned within a lot of my own relationship dynamics, to start shifting to this place of, do you want my advice? Because I'm not going to share it unless you ask for it. This is also a really great boundary for those out there that are coaches, that are in the healing arts, to create this boundary with people that you don't know, or even people that are close to you, but you're not necessarily their coach or their mentor, or offering like in a formal way their healing arts. You can learn to kind of understand, I don't have to offer my services every time somebody is expressing something to me or sharing something with me. I used to assume that people would share things with me because they wanted my advice, because that was typically the role that I played. And I learned, it took me a long time, but I did learn that, not everybody necessarily wants my advice. They just want to be heard. And honestly, I would even go so far as to say that the best coaching and healing that you can do is by listening. And this one's one of my favorites too. Thank them when finished. Honor the person for sharing, because it takes so much vulnerability. It is so difficult, especially if you're taking the time to reflect on your own as to what triggered you, why it triggered you, having to nurture yourself, and then having to come back to your partner and share with them. That requires so much vulnerability. And if you want to create intimacy within your relationships, vulnerability has to be present. So, okay, now let's talk about what I believe it takes to be a skilled sharer. Ask, is now a good time? So good. I really think, like, honestly, I feel that this is something that we could integrate within all of our relationships fairly easily, and even within society. Whenever we want to share, is now a good time? I want to talk to you about something. I want to share something that's been coming up in my heart. I just think that that is a beautiful way to kind of just check in with someone and see whether or not they are able to hold space for you. And again, this is an act of love, not only for yourself, but for the other person, right? Service to self is service to others. Service to others is service to self. So it goes both ways. When you ask someone, is now a good time, you're actually setting both of you up for having a better experience, because you're actually making sure that the person has the time and space for them to receive you the way that you deserve to be received. And it puts you more at ease and not feeling like you have to rush, or not feeling, midway, if the person is listening to you and they're getting distracted or whatever, you can then say to yourself, I did ask. And you can also bring that up to them. Look, I did ask, but you seem distracted. I asked if now was a good time. You seem distracted. Would a later time be better? It really does set you up for so much more success when both people have the time and space to share and listen. Another thing that I think really makes an excellent skilled sharer is connecting to the feeling first, because then you can really seek out the truth of the feeling. So again, I know we talk about, I know a lot of other communication coaches talk about expressing how you feel. It's how you feel. It's not what you think. When you say, when you say, I feel like my partner doesn't care about me, you're actually thinking that your partner doesn't care about you. What you're feeling is dismissed, neglected. I feel like maybe I should just dedicate an entire episode to feeling words, because that took me a long time, folks. It took me such a long time. I was that person sitting in therapy saying things like, I feel like my partner doesn't care about me. And she was like, that's not a feeling. And it took me a long time to be like, okay, I feel fine. I feel sad, disappointed, discouraged, or I feel dismissed, or I feel neglected, or, in order for me to really understand, like, okay, these are feeling words, these are thinking words, the feeling, and then there's the meaning that we associate with the feeling. And we really want to not allow that to happen. Or if it does happen, go underneath the meaning, go underneath the story. So connecting to your feeling first allows you to kind of hopefully not attribute the meaning, right? Not attribute meaning or value or a story. And so therefore you can just deal with the bare bones of what it is that you are feeling. I statements. Of course, I know you. This is our reality. It's not their reality. Our perception is limited, especially when we're triggered, So it's really, really important for us to say I, because you need to claim yourself. You need to take ownership for your perspective. And that's okay, right? Your perspective might be slightly skewed based on previous conditioning and traumas, and that's okay. But if we're speaking from I and we're keeping the focus on ourselves and how we're feeling and what it is that we're doing and what is coming up for us, then we can come at things from a much clearer vantage point. Thank them the best you can, even if they didn't do a good job. Yeah, I believe that it's always important to express gratitude to someone when listening, because it does require energy. And I believe that it doesn't matter whether or not they do a good job. They listened. And honestly, that's especially if they like properly in some ways held space, that's more than a lot of people. They were willing to hear you. So thank them. Have gratitude. Self-care afterwards. So important again, right? Especially if you feel that you weren't received well. It is especially important to participate in self-care. I feel that sometimes even when you are received in a beautiful way, that self-care is important, because it also helps you. I don't know, like it's always so interesting. I've kind of begun to experience it. Me sharing is not necessarily me sharing, even in the presence of a skilled listener, does not always, it's not really the thing that gives me the closure that I think it does. I think it's really the self-care that I participate in, the reflection that I participate in afterward, that really is what makes me feel good, makes me feel like I can move on, gives me that resolution. And then I also just put here, a skilled sharer is also allowed to call a timeout if sharing isn't producing the results you want or need. Absolutely. At any time. If you feel like, the person, you had asked, are you free for me to share this with you? Is now a good time? If they say yes, and then they're super distracted, picking up their phone every 5 seconds or rushing you in the process, you absolutely can feel free to call a timeout or say, you know what? I really wanted to share this with you. I feel that you're or I feel, see, I feel dismissed when you're constantly picking up your phone. That's what you would say. Now, I feel that you're distracted. I feel dismissed or neglected when you keep picking up your phone. Maybe a different time would work better. Or you could just decide that, depending on who it is, that maybe the thing that you need to share, that person really can't receive to the depth that you want to share. And that is okay. And sometimes we really just have to say, you know what, like, this person is not willing to receive me, or this person is not able to receive me. So I'm going to choose not to share this information. And that is not like, I think a lot of people would say, well, that's vindictive. That's a level, that is you participating in self-care. That's you taking care of yourself. You know what you need, you know what you want. And when you're not getting that, unfortunately, you continuing to participate in the sharing when a person is not meeting you in the way that you need. And there's been conversation around that, right? Like there's been, you've shared that with them, or maybe not. You don't have to share with them. Sharing is vulnerable, and it's a gift, just like listening is a gift. Both of them are equally valued. Both of them are equally important. Both of them are equally cherished. And as much of they are both divine gifts. So if you're finding that a partner or someone in your life can't meet you there, then yeah, feel free to always withhold. And maybe by doing so, in some ways, you will start to create a deeper relationship with yourself and self-love for yourself, and then ultimately manifest a person who can. Yeah, so just some questions that I will leave with you that would be really good. I'll go through them kind of slowly so that you can maybe just jot them down quickly, because this is just a really great takeaway. So I'm gonna try to really, you guys know how much I can talk sometimes, but I will, or how fast I can talk, but I'll really try to go at these slow, because these are some really valuable questions. Growing up, I witnessed my parents communicate in a way that looked like. So what ways did you see the people around you communicate? I think it's not only important to bring, to not only investigate how your parents communicated, but everybody. Not everybody, but you know what I'm saying. Everybody that was in your immediate environment. Your parents obviously are most important, but some people didn't experience two parents in the household. So I'm just going to say, your mom, your dad, your siblings, what was the style of communication like in your family? Okay, now the following are all related to listening. When someone is talking, do I listen for what's new or what is familiar to me, something that I can relate to? And you can just answer yes or no to these, and they'll guide you as to how well of a skilled listener and skilled sharer you are. When someone is talking to me and sharing a problem of theirs, do I listen in silence or try to offer support, solutions, and stories of my own that are similar? You know what? I might include these in the description. I'll do that. I'll include these in the description so that you guys can have them. When I'm listening, I find it easy to feel that person and stay attentive to them. Or my mind wanders quickly. I get bored. I'm just waiting for my turn to speak. Put your hand up if you've ever done that. The thing that annoys me most when I'm trying to share something with someone or tell them a story is when they reflect and notice when you do the exact thing that annoys you to other people. This is not a judgment. This is purely an exercise of self-awareness. Okay, now on the sharing and speaking aspect, when I have something big I need to tell someone, I dive straight in or I ask them when would be a good time to talk. Can you guess what mine is? When I'm talking, energy gets stuck in my head, or I can feel the sensations and emotions present in my body. The deeper truths about myself I don't like to talk about are I don't want to expose this about myself because I'm afraid if I do, then blank will happen. The likelihood of this worst case scenario playing out if I share what feels vulnerable to me is the likelihood of a positive outcome coming from sharing my deeper truth and feelings is what might it cost me in my life if I continue to hold the vulnerable and tender parts of me in? Could the fears I have around sharing my vulnerability actually stem from self-judgment I hold against myself? Yes. And lastly, write down something that is a stretch for you, something that takes you out of your comfort zone, then choose someone you trust to share that with them. Okay, guys. So, yeah. Um, I just thought it was really important to share, this episode after I talked about conflict resolution in the previous one, because I feel that it is such a topic, obviously, definitely a big enough topic that deserved its own episode. There are some other topics that I shared in the Q&A episode that I afterwards kind of felt like I wanted to touch on more. So I might do a part 2 to that episode, or I might do little mini break off episodes to discuss a few of those topics more in depth, because I really just I want to do them justice. And obviously, like answering them on the fly really didn't create that opportunity. So that's like putting it really mildly. But yeah, so here it is, all of it that I have to say about conflict resolution. I hope you guys take away some value from this episode. Just as a reminder, if you're ever interested in some additional guidance or coaching, I am offering coaching as well as mentoring sessions on my website now. I am also practicing shamanism and offering, oh my gosh, you guys, I'm offering so much. I'm offering so much. Just go to my website, kimberlydam.com. I also have a it's called Radical Love. It's a masterclass for those seeking conscious relationships and sacred ecstatic sex. That's going to be coming out. There's just so much, so much. So I will leave you with that. Go to my website if you want all the information. It can all be found there. But anyways, I love you and I hope that you stay well and stay connected.